Is there anything else you can recall ticking off during this meeting?
No, but you have the note, and I'm sure you can find it. It's toward the end of my tenure. It's somewhere after June and July when both houses had passed it, and before I got fired, and you got 100 and some odd folks to go through my notebooks, Counsel.
We'll find it.
I'm sure you will.
In addition to raising money from third countries, I take it you also raised some money from private individuals.
I want to be very clear about that. Not because of Boland, but because I understood that there were regulations against government officials soliciting. I do not recall ever asking a single solitary American citizen for money. I want to make that very clear. You may have found someone who said that I did, but I sure don't remember it, and I tried very, very hard to live with that proscription. Not because it was Boland, not because we perceived that the NSC was in any way obviated from doing what I was doing, but only because someone had told me that a U.S. government official should not, cannot, will not, whatever, solicit.
Well, you asked Joseph Coors for $65,000 for a Mall airplane, didn't you?
He offered the money, and I told him where to send it, and an airplane was bought with it, and it flies today in support of the Nicaraguan resistance unless the Sandinistas have shot it down.
Did you call him?
No. He arrived in my office one afternoon.
Would you describe that event?
Well, again, you're probably going to pull out a note of mine that's got something on it. And if you can, refresh me, but otherwise I'll go unrefreshed. As I had seen Mr. Coors a number of times, both before and since. It is my recollection that Mr. Coors arrived in my office one afternoon. I got a telephone call from Director Casey. Maybe I went down and met Mr. Coors in Mr. Casey's office, or maybe he walked into my office. I don't recall specifically. He offered to help, asked what he could do. I suggested various things, showed him an airplane that was desperately needed, a STOL airplane that would take off, short takeoff and land. And he said, "Good, how much is it?" Or words to that effect. I said, "There's the price list from the company." And Mr. Coors then made available that sum, and it was put in the account, and an airplane was bought with it. But I didn't ask him for that money. He offered it.
We've had a lot of testimony from people who said that you made speeches to them about the Contras and then told them that you couldn't ask for money, but that Mr. Channel or somebody else could, and that they then were asked to make contributions, and that they did so. And we've also had some testimony from people who were told that if they made contributions in a certain amount, they would have a meeting with you or a meeting with the president. Did those things occur?
I made a lot of speeches. I made a lot of speeches to people in favor of our policy in Central America, and I made speeches to those who were opposed to it. I even brought that same speech up here and gave it to members of Congress. I gave it to various committees. I gave that speech to Americans who then went out and made contributions not solicited by me.
Well, for example, did you sit down with Ellen Garwood at the Hay Adams Hotel and show her a list of munitions that the Contras needed, together with Spitz Channel, giving an amount of money that needed to be contributed in order to purchase the weapons, and did she thereafter make the contribution?
I do not recall the specific event that you're talking about, but I met a number of times with Lady Ellen Garwood. I met a number of times with a lot of different people. I'm not denying that I did those things, and if she said that I showed a munitions list, I showed a lot of munitions lists.
You showed a lot of different people munitions lists?
Sure.
And told them how much...
People would ask me, what do these things cost? And I'd take out a munitions list, and I'd say, well, there's what the cost of one of these things are, or many of those things are. That's what they cost.
And did you let them know how much the Contras needed money for munitions?
I let them know how much the Contras needed everything. The Nicaraguan freedom fighters were at a point where they were dying in the field under Soviet
And did you
Hind
do that
helicopters.
together with Spitz Channel?
Let him finish.
Pardon?
Please. I know you don't like the answer, but let him finish.
I like the answer fine. It was not
Well, fine,
responsive.
then let him answer.
He had finished answering the
He
question.
had not finished answering, or I wouldn't have raised the subject.
Proceed.
I don't know whose turn it is, Mr. Chairman.
Did you sit down with these people together with Spitz Channel?
Yes, on a number of occasions.
And
I sat down with Mr. Channel and others.
And did you, after telling them what the Contras' needs were, did you tell them that Mr. Channel would be the one who would have to ask them for a contribution?
I don't recall ever saying those words to anybody.
Did you say...
I want to make it very clear. I did tell people I could not and would not solicit, that I wasn't going to ask them for their money. And I do not recall ever being in the presence of Mr. Channel at any time when he asked someone for money. At any time. Nor do I ever recall Mr. Channel offering someone a visit to the Oval Office or the President of the United States of America for a price. I received several suggestions to that effect by several other people, and they were turned away. I never, ever heard that a certain contribution would result in a meeting with the President of the United States of America. I do not recall ever being at such a meeting.
Did you arrange such meetings Did you arrange such meetings with the President?
I do not believe that I personally arranged. I may have sent forward scheduled proposals, and you will certainly have them because I would have had copies of them in my office. I don't remember more than one or two occasions where I actually asked for meetings that I set up. Now, others at the White House did indeed set those up, and I was a party to that, knowing that these were contributors that had helped the resistance. Or these are people who might contribute to the resistance. So those meetings did happen at the White House, yes.
And some of them were with people who had actually made contributions.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And the contributions had been obtained in part through your efforts.
People give me a lot of credit. If someone wants to say it was a speech by Ollie North that made me want to give money to help the Nicaraguan resistance, I appreciate that.
Well, I'd like you to turn to Exhibit 10. It's in the first book. It's a prof's message from you to Admiral Poindexter, dated May 16, 1986.
I believe it's from Admiral Poindexter to someone else. Either that or I'm looking at the wrong one.
You're looking at the wrong one. It starts at the very bottom of the first page.
Okay.
Note from Oliver North.
Right.
I'd like you to take a look at the bottom of the second page, where it says, I have no idea what Don Regan does or does not know, Ray, my private U.S. operation. But the President obviously knows why he has been meeting with several select people to thank them for their, quote, support for democracy, unquote, in Central America. My first question...
Counsel, can you
Pardon?
help us locate that, please?
Yeah, it's at the very bottom of the second page. second to the last line. I'll read it again.
I got it.
I have no idea what Don Regan does or does not know, Ray, my private U.S. operation. But the President obviously knows why he has been meeting with several select people to thank them for their, quote, support for democracy, unquote, in Central America. My first question is, what is, quote, my private U.S. operation? What does that refer to?
Well, I don't know. It must mean my activities, my discussions with people.
Private contributors.
Sure. I don't know exactly what I meant at that particular point in time.
But you don't call it Spitz Channel's operation, you call it your operation. You don't need to respond to that. And when you refer to his meeting with several select people to thank them for their support for democracy, I take it those are people who have made contributions.
I would guess so, yes.
And I take it that when you gave speeches to these people, one of the purposes was to get them to make a contribution.
One of the purposes of my talking to people was indeed to encourage that they do whatever they felt moved to do to support the cause of a democratic outcome in Nicaragua.
Was the President aware of your U.S. operation to raise funds for the Contras from private contributors?
Well, I think that prof's note right there indicates that I believed he was. But I didn't ever walk in and, by the way, say to him, Mr. President, this is what I did. I know I've been accused of those kinds of things, but I didn't do that. And the fact is that I assumed, and I think that's a fairly clear indication, I'm sending my boss what I thought was going to be a very private note that would never see the light of day anywhere else. And I said to him what I felt. And I was asking him for guidance.
And he certainly didn't tell you to stop.
Why would he? We were conducting a covert operation to support the Nicaraguan resistance, to carry out the President of the United States' stated, publicly articulated foreign policy. Why should he tell me to stop? We weren't breaking any laws. We were simply trying to keep an operation covert.
Thank you, Colonel North. I have no further questions this afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
The hearings will stand in recess until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
First in Ohio, TV 5. Live from Ohio's news channel, this is Live.